Peace out, brothers and sisters. It's Rich McLean, and I've got a bit of a story to tell. You see, I'm in a very difficult situation. I'm just here with Crystal, my beautiful husky, and I'm sitting here in the backyard, and what's happened is that there's a provable, verifiable conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, and no one's acknowledging it or signing off on it, and no one's too concerned. This is a problem for me because as a person whose human rights are being abused and who's been neglected, the continuing silence surrounding this report that was done by Tash, my NDOS worker, is an elongation of the abuse that's already occurring to me. Now, I worked for 30 years in this country advocating for other people and for people whose lives were affected by mental illness and their carers. But now I've needed some advocacy, and the world has literally forsaken me over a long period of time. And there are reasons for this, quantifiable reasons. First of all, if I could divide the conspiracy into three different elements. One is Steve Isonides, my former partner and ASIO agent, who exploited me over 5 years as he earned $30,000-$40,000 a month and demanded that I be on a disability pension. He said I was going to lose my freedom, and it was coercive financial control. It's called family violence, and I didn't know at the time that I was being used and exploited. The other second part of that question is the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet. Now, they have a dossier on everyone, and I would have been especially easily indicated in that freedom of information, which was refused because I've been a public person at the Age and the Herald Sun, in a public role as an illustrator and news graphics artist. That's one reason. The second reason is for Steve. You don't get to be engaged to an ASIO employee for 5 years and not have the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet realise what's going on. And of course, David Irvine, the boss, the big boss of ASIO, condoned my exploitation by allowing me to accept a pension. And I forgot my train of thought. And the other thing is a very powerful lawyer called Russell Ball. Russell Ball advises government policy and he informs the Ombudsman. And I'm a failed whistleblower at the Ombudsman. Now, there's a couple of things that have happened in my life that bear mentioning. One was to do with that lawyer, Mr. Ball, and his silencing of my evidence for a malpractice case in which it was me who was framed as the bad guy and the extortionist. However, a lot of state and federal agencies have since towed the party line in silencing that evidence and accepting that he was able to effectively silence me and redact me from any lawyer ever. I'm 50 and I've had a lot of legal issues and I've never had a lawyer. And for this, I'm psychometrically profiled. By that I mean the government monitor phone numbers and addresses and your name and your date of birth. And when you appear on government registries in different statutory organisations and authorities, a big red button goes off that says, "Do not help this person." And I'm a person of interest of the Australian government, and I'm a targeted individual. And this profound victimisation of me has vilified me as someone who's self-identified with a mental illness, and has excluded all other factors, including the fact that public officials and lawyers and agents in the government and powerful people as well, politicians, are a part of the system which allows the mechanisms of a scapegoat to exist. So if I'm calling out on government corruption, which goes above their heads right up to the top, then I'm probably not going to get much traction. Now, I've had a almost flawless ethics that I believe in the rule of law, and I believe in justice, and I believe that justice will come. But sadly for me, that's never happened. Now, there's a few key players I want to mention. Oh, there's another issue as well. So I had schizophrenia, I had a public profile, and of course I've got the PhD. People don't like a smart cunt. They like someone to be, the government and powers that be, like someone to be malleable and to agree and to be like the others. I've never been that person, and I refuse to be, even now. Most people are lemmings. They just follow and they like to blend in. And this has been a difficulty with me existing with the other humans in my life. Now, at the time of the publication of my book, Recovered Not Cured, A Journey Through Schizophrenia, I was thrust into the public spotlight, and the Herald Sun, where I used to work, who didn't like my left leanings and that I was gay, really character assassinated me in their paper. It was called My Descent into Madness, How Schizophrenia Stole Rich McLean's Mind. And that was published in the Sunday Herald Sun, and it went out there. It was my words, but they presented it and reframed it in a light which was defamatory, and it had put shame on me. And you know what? That's not my shame to have. That's actually their shame. And everyone who treated me differently because of that book or because of that article, it's their shame to have and not mine. You see, I was a 5-year-long stretch illustrator at the age by that stage, and I loved that job. And they fired me. It was clearly related to the publication of my book and the publication of that awful heading, which really vilified me as mad to the exclusion of all other factors. And I mean, at the one time they call me mad and my descent into madness, but I'm happily working and having a good life over at the Age. Now, the Age powers that be didn't like this, and I think that people really don't like anything that's unusual. They don't like things that are out off the cuff. Madness is one of those things that really has an unexpectedness about it, because people don't know what to expect or to understand it. And you see, but in terms of evolution, biological evolution that is, madness is actually a necessary thing in order to advance the species. Because without it, there'd be no irregularities and there'd be no evolution. So in the same way, I see a person such as a mad person expressing themselves, or the unusual or illogical nature of a very existential perspective, which could shake the boundaries of how people perceive and see the world. It would be too upsetting and people would be too scared. And that proved to be true. And there were things in that book that that I'm not proud of. I had regretful sex. I fucked her. But it was consensual sex. The fact that I ended up being gay was really important, because at the time, if that was a crime, which it wasn't, and the police were all there, because it happened at the police and firemen's breakup ball, don't you think that something had happened? It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't nasty. It was simply that after the fact, I came out as gay and had a bit of a meltdown. Now, Victoria Police, who were all there, are not well known for their friendliness towards queer people, especially back in 1990 or whenever it was. And so for that, and for the shame that friends and family put on me, for a vulnerable person, and I really wonder how I survived that actually. But I came through it, and I came out, and all was well and good. But the damage had been done, because the stigma and the shame and the spaces between spaces, the inference, the perspective of people who were in the community, it was a real lifelong poofter bashing. No one explicitly said, "You're wrong for being gay, we hate you," but the tone and the inference between people through all that time, and even today, is still present. And it's just an absurdness to the whole thing. Like, I'm a peaceful person. Sure, I like sex, but I've never hurt anyone, not intentionally anyway. And I just live pretty simply, really. I've lent off my Buddhist ethics, because if I didn't live simply and I lusted for the luxurious things in life, I wouldn't have survived. So right now I've got about $10 to my name. I'm 50 years old. I can't really summarise really quite briefly what's occurred to me, but I did the PhD, and I've been an artist my whole life, and I've exhibited all over Australia and spoken all over Australia on local, state, federal and even international levels. And the level of gratitude and acknowledgement for that effort, from what I've been shown by people and the Australian government, has been a brutal portrayal to my kindness and my altruism. It's thankless. It's more than thankless, just innocuous not thanking me. It's actually identifying me as they have, and victimising me, and then intentionally and maliciously persecuting me. And you can look no further than the triangulation of the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, an ASIO agent, and an influential lawyer who informs government policy, and you can easily witness, and I've got the documents, I've got the evidence that this is occurring, and further, that any injustice that I've fought over my time and not been able to get a settlement for, or compensation, or an acknowledgement of my pain, was in a way absolutely and utterly corrupt from the beginning. And just recently, my work covers failed. Now, it's taken 2.5 years to get to the determination that, sorry, you weren't working. I mean, what was I doing? So this decision at the AAT by member Pennell and is totally and utterly, it's biased, it's corrupted, and it hasn't been a decision that's been intensely scrutinised, and it hasn't been a decision that's been really independent for the purposes that I've just outlined. Now, that probably lost me about, I don't know, 700 grand, but I'm used to this abuse, because the government's already said no, and they've got a government lawyer to defend the idea. And where does the decision get heard at? At a government office. Now, this gets really full on, because in I'd finished my PhD and began working as an NDIS support therapist and arts therapist, and I loved the job. Things started to go bad for two reasons. First of all, I was frustrated that I wasn't getting traction in the malpractice case, but I didn't know yet that this lawyer, Mr. Ball, informs government policy. The second thing is that a week before I went into hospital for the first time, I'd actually emailed Steve's lawyer and demanded an equal, fair settlement for the time altogether, and how he exploited me. I came in much under the mark, and I was very fair. However, he acted with the powers that be, and the next thing you know, it's me who's, again, vilified for mental illness, called delusional, when there is actually a demonstrable and provable conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, which was then occurring. Not that I knew how yet or the evidence, but I was stitched up. I was a well-known person. I was especially well-known now for my tireless self-advocacy, and I became a person of interest. Now, I'll get to when I was hospitalised in a minute, but first of all, there was another issue too. And I'm going to say it now. I've never said it before, out of the freedom from his protection and by acting ethically. But when I was a kid, Bob Martin, my neighbour, showed me his cock and wanted me to suck it. Now, my family are they're awesome people, they really are, but there's an implied homophobia that's just deeply ingrained in our family. They'll tell you the opposite, but so as a kid growing up, I didn't think I could tell anyone because he was a bad man. Mum used to warn me, don't go near the toilets, there's bad men near there, they'll get you. And so I carried that shame for most of my life until I was about 44 or 5, and then I finally made the report and told everyone, and it was kind of silenced. It wasn't acknowledged. No one asked how I was. Everyone just kind of tried to see me as a bit of a troublemaker, as a liar, and as someone which was implied now that I was doing this in order to extort money. This is ridiculous. Anyway, so that case failed at the Geelong VOCAT Court, Victims of Crime Tribunal. And I went into great detail about how him and another boy, Greg Wall, in my childhood, had abused me, and how it affected me in my life, and how it was so intolerable that when I finally had the courage to say something, no one acknowledged it. There wasn't even a talk, there wasn't a whisper about it. It was silenced. And I'd gone to great lengths in order to kind of try and prove that this actually was a thing that had great effect on me as a child and me over my life. And I was finally going to get to some kind of acknowledgement for the deceit and for the shaming and for how misunderstood me as a sexual abuse survivor could be. And it never came, because the Geelong magistrate finally got back to me, and she wrote me a PDF, and it said that I was doomed to fail. Now, that's really colourful language when you're talking about a sexual abuse survivor. It's really quite extraordinary language, and I didn't understand why that was happening for me. But at the same time, we've got old Russell Ball, your old mate there, and he's badmouthed me to all government agencies and framed me as an extortionist for having an innocuous recording of this Dr. Whittaker. Now, I didn't take that with malice or any intention to do anything with it. I took that because over months I kept on telling him I was going to kill myself, and nothing was done. I felt like I was being gaslighted, not heard. And on a whim, before I went into the doctor's surgery that day, I pressed record, and the rest is history. Now, I'd forgotten about that utterly and totally. After I moved to Susie's, I found the suicide note from which Dr. Whittaker had given me the drugs to do it, actually in the same consultation. And so I thought, well, I did survive death. It's really an unethical thing. I should at least make point of it. And I kept the recording hidden, trying to acknowledge the way this had happened to me without any evidence, and they kept blindsiding me. So finally I just said, fuck, here's the recording. And from that point on, Mr. Ball had framed me as an extortionist. This wasn't the case. I would have been genuinely happy with an apology or an acknowledgement that this tragedy had happened to me, because I overdosed and I survived. And after I lived, that's when I moved to Susie's and found the suicide note, and that led me to the recording, and that led me to the complaint. But by then, my damage had done, and my reputation systemically, politically, and in society had been stitched up. Now, so all this is going on. You know what? If I had never stuck my head out, I could have just been blending in with the others, you know? It's too late for me now. I can't pack this life back into a box. I really can't. And too many people out there are now aware that a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice is happening, and that it's a profound victimisation of me, which has caused me immense harm and is causing me harm. Now, this harm came to its peak in February 2021, where after I was vilified for being paranoid and suicidal, I wasn't, and there's a recording of that, I was put into hospital and they gave me medication I didn't want, and the medication I did want, they took away. Now, that led me to be totally and utterly isolated in the world. I believed the world had forsaken me, that the world knew damn well what my issues were, but they were not acknowledged, and not only were they ignored, they were pointedly neglected. And this caused a great distraction for me one day when I thought I'd end it all. And I remember that day I bawled my eyes out. I was in so much grief for the world and pain for it. I just thought the only way to escape this mechanism by which my carers were also my abusers was to self-exterminate. So I remember having the dinner. I called it the Last Supper, and I had a bit of rubbery ham and whatever it was, and I went into my room and I got my vape. I tried first with the toilet brush to slit my artery open, and then that didn't work, so I got the vape pen, and I had a bit of glass in it, so I severed my artery in my arm, and I spent probably about 40 or 50 minutes bleeding out on the shower floor until I was unconscious. And when they found me, I had no pulse, and I was unresponsive. And the Freedom of Information from that time said that it was a fatal injury and a lethal attempt. And for that is a profound shame that people lump me with, but I believe on the balance of probabilities that a lot of other people are responsible for that. And the hospital absolutely had a duty of care to look after me. And the fact that they cited me or called me suicidal was evidence enough that they knew there was an imminent risk. They did not protect me, and I'm owed a settlement from that hospital. But now, incredibly, 2.5 years later, or over 2.5 years, there's a cover-up at the Health Complaints Commissioner, at the Mental Health Complaints Commissioner, at the police, at IBAC, at the Victorian Inspectorate, at AHPRA, at NHPOPC, and the Commonwealth Ombudsman. I've told politicians, I've told people, I've told my friends and my family. They all know it happened, but the shame of suicide is so profound for some people that they think it might embarrass them or indict them somehow, that they were somehow responsible for this. They want to forget it, and they want me to move on. Unfortunately for me, it's difficult to move on, because not only am I the subject of a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, but I'm continually being victimised. Now, this goes on even further. You wouldn't believe this story. So anyway, here I am recovering, and I'm trying to oppose the fact that I've had a suicide attempt, and it's just been cut off at every direction. The Ombudsman said there was nothing to see. Of course, I couldn't get a lawyer, and now I've got a cognitive brain impairment, which wouldn't be proven till over 2 years later. But during that time, more awful things began to happen to me. So I was off work, I'd claimed work cover, and I thought I'd collect on my insurance. Now, I originally collected on the insurance at HCF because I wanted to take a couple of weeks off, and I was going to go back to work after that. My issue with work was that I was triggered by my own clients' child sexual abuse, rape and incest stories, and that I was actually spending over a year and a half detailing his experience and narrative and writing it down and keeping it in my own head for the purposes of his VOCAT case. And when I failed mine, I knew that I'd been catastrophically character assassinated, and I understood that my important work with him was delegitimised and it wasn't going to be effective. And for that, I had no control. I was doing the work, I was good at it, but I was triggered by the stories, and in addition to that, there was a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, which made my evidence for him for his VOCAT case negligible and pointless. That's why I took the break from work, and I went to HCF and said, I just want my income assist for a few weeks, then I'll be back on track. This went on until the present day. They never paid. Sheena Jack at HCF is a powerful political person with enormous money and privilege, and they're a part of this movement of oppression. It's not sufficient evidence to say that it was a prior existing condition, and in actual fact I've got evidence to demonstrate from Dr. Richard Moore that my illness was never even an issue in the years preceding that. So here you have concrete evidence that they should have paid me my income assist, but that money was consciously and maliciously and intentionally redacted from me in a way which was not impartial, it was not fair, and it was cooked from the top. Now, there's been other ways I've lost money. Everyone will remember my website, Rich McLean, or RichieMcLean.com, which it was at the time. I spent 20 years on that website. It was served as the mechanism and the architecture for my whole business. And it really was the epicenter of everything I did. It had my advocacy on it, had my artwork, had my books, had everything. And it was the email address which I used for all my logins, my banking, everything, tax. And out of the blue came a message from James Brownberg, or whatever his name is, from Micron 21, a web hosting company that was linked to the government. And they said, effective as of today, we will no longer have any of your conspiratorial ideas, and you're no longer a customer. We've deleted your website, we've deleted your emails and all the backups. You are no longer a customer, and if you try and get back to us, we've blocked all communication. I couldn't believe it. That's like someone going to your business. Imagine a business. It's the business, richmclean.com.au, was the ABN. That ABN was my business and the architecture of everything I did, personally and professionally. And with one fell swoop, with a nod from the top, my whole world was destroyed. My online business, how I earned money, how I promoted myself. And I thought they couldn't do this. So I was blown away by the audacity of it, that they thought they could do it. And so I went ahead trusting the institutions that are here in society in order to oppose their action. And for that, I went to the Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman, and they silenced it. And I went to business.com, and they silenced .gov.au. They silenced it. I went to the Small Business Enterprise Family Ombudsman, and they silenced it too. Now, all these agencies and all these government departments were absolutely not impartial. They were informed to not act with me, and it was from the top. It was based on my public profile and by the ways I'd explained before of me being a targeted individual. So I've just been oppressed. I've killed myself. They've covered it up. I've lost my HCS income assist and I've lost my insurance. And then I'm trying to get these settlements done at the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, which was the independent authority, apparently independent, in the government. And I had a dispute with Bendigo Bank. I had a work cover issue. I had my income assist issue. I had the settlement with Steve. I won 50 grand on an online pokies place, and they never paid me, and they exploited my bank balance. I had all these settlements that I needed done, and AFCA have 6 weeks to determine a financially vulnerable person's case at an ombudsman. They were aware of my financial troubles way back in 2019. This is 2021. So they took on the cases, and month after month, I kept getting the runaround. Delay, deny, defer. That's the government mantra. And if anyone's ever suffered at the hands of the government or a bureaucracy, that is exactly the way that they abuse and vilify, reject and deny people their rights. And so it was delayed, denied, it came up to about 1.5 years. And I've recorded Tim Goss from AFCA, the head of service delivery. He's a political key stakeholder. He's a rich man. He's paid a very high public wage. And he's there because he's got a nod from the top, and he's to delay, deny, defer my justice to exclusion of all other factors. And he was caught gaslighting me on a video on YouTube that I've got. Anyway, turns out they ended up banning me. How can you be banned from a regular statutory authority as a free citizen of the country? It's absurd. This abuse of me is a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. It victimises me needlessly, and it uses the vilification of me as a mentally ill person in order to get away with it. Now, I'm a doctor. You don't get to be a doctor unless you've had some profound study and some intensive critical evaluation of facts. I absolutely know what's happening for me, and sadly, the world does too. Now, there was another case that was happening over at Australian Super. They refused to insure me. This is because I think of the book that was in the public domain, but when I started the job at NDIS, I wanted to be insured, for insurance purposes, but they wouldn't. No total permanent disability and no income protection. So this was a delay, deny, defer methodology as well, and it went up right up to the Office of Australian Human Rights Commission, and I had a conference there, and the conference was with Liz Lindbergh, who was there to impartially direct the conference and arrive at a resolution, which I was hopeful for. I just wanted my insurance. So it happened, but she rang up and said, they've decided not to talk to you, and that's it. Now, that's not an impartial statement. If you're agreeing to have a conciliation at a government high statutory authority, such as the Australian Human Rights Commission, and you've agreed to a meeting and you're going to meet for the decision of determining the outcome, but the Australian Human Rights Commission say, they don't want to do it, so that's the end of it, that's not impartial. That's called a nod from the top, and that don't pay rich any money. That's what that's called. And that's illegal, that's inequitable, that's unfair, and it cost me over $1.5 million. And you can spot the moment that Liz Lindbergh, and it's on this YouTube channel, says they don't want to agree in participation anymore, and losing me $1.5 million in the same way she says, pass the salt. Now, that's an illegal thing, and that's corruptible conduct of a public official, of Liz Lindbergh and Tim Goss as well. And there are many of them. So I lost that, and I've recorded that. It's there for all to see. History will catch up and find out that I've been needlessly scapegoated, untreated fairly, and a victim. And I'm a victim. I'm not victim-minded. Like, I'm actually really positive. I can be seen as argumentative and obtuse and all those things, and cranky. But that's what happens to abused people. When you abuse people, it hurts them in all dimensions. So physically, emotionally, in self-esteem, in self-worth, in all other ways. It can affect drugs and alcohol. It can affect risk-taking behaviour. It can affect sexuality. It can affect all sorts of things. And when you're so profoundly and systemically abused, not only as a child and later through your life, but publicly vilified, and then again vilified by the government, and vilified so systemically and politically, I'm sorry if I'm cranky, all right? My sister doesn't even talk to me. My brother doesn't even talk to me. Now, they've got their implied issues of their own, but I love my family and I'm appreciative of all the support they've given me. But to just blacklist you out of your life, like, that's an absurd amount of what I perceive as abuse. They would perceive me as difficult, and you know what? I think I upset the models with which they live their lives. So it pierces this kind of delusion of apathy. I shouldn't say that, but it pierces the way they see themselves, and I think I bring embarrassment to them. I think I bring embarrassment to my parents, and I think that sometimes I think, it's not my shame to have. It's not. I actually own what I've done. I've actually spoken about my shame, and I've actually been really forthright and really courageously honest about the thing the whole way through, really through my whole life. And in this, I believe that this silencing from family members is just another example of how people think of you. Now, I put a video out last night, and it's shame too, and it causes grief and abuse, and it makes me angry. I love all people, and I've always loved all people, and I still love all people, despite the whole of the world seemingly, absolutely and utterly, 100% forsaking me. And there's a few things to say about that, but first of all, I put out a video last night begging for help, basically, and Russell Johnson, this guy I used to know, goes, you're lower than shark shit, fuck off, you scum of the earth, get a job, you fucking cunt, and get off the gear, you fucking stupid, And then I got one off Susie, my best friend, who I love. Hi, Susie, and she said, you've pissed me off and all this kind of stuff. And I understand how, just in normal communication and my normal experience of the world, when this has touched all parts of my life absolutely and thoroughly, that it's difficult for people to acknowledge. And when I do ask them to do it, they're placed at impossible odds that they can't, or they don't know how to, even if I instruct them on how to. And for this is the burden of a scapegoat, because you can never really have an authentic relationship or express how you're really feeling, because you're feeling abused and angry, and you're feeling forsaken and let down, and you feel like no one's sticking up for you. And I appreciate everything that everyone's ever done for me. I really do. But by the same token, was it ever enough to bring justice? And was it ever enough to make a meaningful difference in my life, in which I would be compensated for the wrongs or the detriments or the insurances, and not just the things that were taken from me. Not just the money that was taken from me. So the things that I did have and I'd worked very hard for were maliciously taken from me. My business destroyed, my insurance destroyed, my rights destroyed, my access to the law destroyed, my equality before the law destroyed, my access to authorities. And it was all on the subtext of judgment. And people are inherently judgmental beings. They really are. And I see this kind of a little bit as a in the Christian faith, as a bit of someone who'd walked the path as a bit of a truth speaker for 30 years and then was literally crucified. And then after that, I was reborn, touched by the hand of God, because I was found basically dead and it was fatal. And then I was revived by the hand of something that wasn't me, and that was fate. And so that was sort of a God intervention, you know. So God saved me, that's the resurrection. Then I was put back here, and then I was absolutely gaslight forsaken. I can't describe it any other way. So if I go on, if I live through this, and I'm hoping to, I don't want to die, then I'm going to have to forgive every single person in my life for not intervening in a way that's meaningful or has enacted change at this point in time in a profound way, because I'm literally so persecuted and victimized that I have no money, I've got no rights, now I've got no business, and people are always putting the emphasis on me, like, you'll have to get back to work. I was on work, had a psychological injury from work and the movement of oppression. Like, I should be resting and looking after my mental health, not be expected to, get back on the horse and then to undo all the damage that they intentionally did to me. Like, that's ridiculous. So anyway, I'm going to get my life back together, and I'm going to be an arts therapist, and I'm going to be a life coach, an arts therapist, even though my life's fucked. You know, sometimes it takes someone who's had a shit life and who's experienced this to be worldly enough to be able to see the pitfalls when other people are going to go through them. So that's the perspective I'm going through for. And I want to say a couple of things wrapping up. So recently, I've been working finally with, first of all, I wanted to say this. So after the hospitalisation and the suicide and the recovery and all, the being revived, I literally couldn't pay rent. I had no money. And so Hung Ho, and I can't believe his name's Hung Ho, anyway, Avidafale, my old landlord, waited until I was incarcerated. First of all, the police ran me out of town. This is right. So the gay bashing of the police kept going for years. And of course, every time I call them, something comes up on their screen and they don't talk to me. But anyway, they're threatening with the Mental Health Act. And of course, I don't want to go back to a hospital where I've literally been oppressed to death and everyone's towed the party line in the cover-up, so my carers and my abusers. This was a political stitch-up. They wanted to silence me. And because I had no money, they threatened me with the Mental Health Act, and the police literally, under threat of the Mental Health Act, ran me out of town. You remember those cartoons in Bugs Bunny and stuff when they have all the angry village folk and stuff with pitchforks and stuff? It was like that. And the cops came and they threatened me with the Mental Health Act, and I wasn't well. I was distressed from the abuse and the underlying mental illness already. And I left. I got in the car and I left. I got the dog and I got in the car and I escaped like a vagrant, or I can't remember the other word, a criminal on the run. But I wasn't a criminal. The real criminal thing that was happening was the systemic, profound oppression that was occurring to me, and public officials, including police, have a responsibility to act ethically and within the Human Rights Charter. And that's never happened for me. Never. So they ran me out of town, but when they finally got me, they chucked me in hospital, and I was there for 10 weeks, 2.5 months, every day, the same 10 metres you'd walk in. And they kept me there, and while I was in there, Hung Ho, good on you, Hung, my landlord, went to my home with the blessing of my carers, the hospital, where I was in, and the police, who I called on the day this was happening, and said they couldn't do anything. And he went there to my house and he got every single thing I own, and he took it to the tip, apart from Matt, my mate, who saved a few things. So I've been systemically, politically and intentionally, maliciously stitched up, victimised, literally murdered, then covered up, then my prosperity taken, my job taken, my business taken, my insurances taken, my house taken, my rental taken, and I was still in the hospital on the phone going, can you please do something to police? And they're saying, oh no, that's over at VCAT. VCAT's got to deal with that. They said you've got to get out. And of course, VCAT towed the party line too as a government agency. They didn't listen to anything I had to say about my financial abuse. They just focused on the rent, excluding all other factors. And the hospital, then when I had nowhere to go, let me go with just a bag of clothes, a bag of t-shirts, and that is what I owned. And I'd worked for 30 years in this country helping other people, and the level of betrayal that I felt when I was in the homeless shelter, and I've just got this bag of clothes and my phone which had a flat battery on it, and I'm just absurdly trying to acknowledge the enormity of what's happened to me. And if that doesn't kill you, I don't know, I must have some superpower resilience, because you know what, some people kill themselves because they're sexually abused or they're not heard. Some people kill themselves because they've lost their partner. Some kill themselves because they lost a best friend or someone to death or something, or they lose their house or they lose their job. All of these things happen to me. And the abuse and the victimization was still profound, it was consistent, and it was elongated, and it's still gone to this very day. And so, as this abuse has been kept on going, so many other stories to tell. I could keep going. I was put in a home where I was fed a drumstick of chicken a day, and they charged me $30,000 off my NDIS plan to put me up for a week. There's no accountability. They're getting away with it. I've asked my support coordinators to arrest them. If I had robbed someone in the street of a watch and I got caught, I'd be put in jail. They robbed $30,000 off me in a week. Anyway, good on you, Rabbi. And what was his name? I forget his name. Anyway, so I finally made it to here. And this brings me to the present situation. So here I am. I'm in Dandenong. And my former partner, through my whistleblowing, has threatened to kill me and my dog because of his corrupt finances, because he's dodgy. He was caught probably with $1 million in embezzlement, so I was told. And as a consequence of being a shit cunt, he wants to now kill my dog as retribution for getting caught. So I'm here, I'm under duress, I'm being abused, I've just lost another work cover case, and that's for the sake of me not being an employee for the purposes of the SRC Act. But I have a document from the federal court clearly stating that I was an employee of the Department of Social Security, which oversees the NDIS. And that's a document that can't be taken lightly or even ignored. It's by a very high-ranking public official, Scott Treadwell, of the federal court, and he's absolutely ruled and satisfied, the federal court is satisfied, that I was an employee. How is it possible, even, that this abuse and this conspiracy that goes right up to the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, who refused my freedom of information, which would have revealed all of those things, and silenced it, has gone to the AAT in a method which was not only unbalanced and unfair and impartial, but the government already said no, and then they had a lawyer to back that, and she was Kate Watson, kind of a thing, and she spent 15 years as an expert in Comcare and the SRC Act. It was unbalanced, it was unfair, and it wasn't independent. This problem of mine, which is proven now in hindsight to be systemic, and it goes right up to the top, means that the AAT decision of me not being a worker, and so I just don't get insurance, despite all evidence to the contrary, is absolutely cooked and it's corrupt. And I'm suffering. So anyway, I've had this NDIS worker, Tash. Hi, Tash. Now, he's a good guy, and he's actually witnessed this persecution happen to me. And everyone knows it's happening, and everyone is borne witness to it, but no one intervenes. It kind of blows my mind. But anyway, I asked Tash to write a report, and he did. Now, so here we have a report from an NDIS worker, a legitimate health worker, who's spent 3 months with me and has observed that I get the big fat no answer everywhere I go. Everywhere. Politicians, lawyers, doctors, the public sector, the private sector, the government, He said, you need to restore his human rights. Here is a person who is a targeted individual and he's been needlessly victimised. And his human rights are at stake and it's causing him harm. And I was really pleased. I almost cried actually when he showed me it. Now, the people that have got me in this house are lovely. I've never meant any harm to them, but just like a scapegoat's curse is, I've now got a problem with them because they won't sign off on the document in which Tash has explicitly detailed my human rights abuses. And they wouldn't sign off on it to legitimise it. So the people that are caring for me are also now my oppressors. And I don't know what to do about it. Now, the person that owns this house where I'm in is the husband of my support coordinator, which is a bit of a conflict of interest. I'm not going to name him. But it's all very difficult for me to comprehend. Now, I'm facing down the barrel of homelessness again, and no justice has ever come to me. And there's been various ways over time in which prosperity could have come to me, and none has ever happened. Now, I don't know what to do because there's a situation now where a human rights abuse is literally happening visibly and knowingly and consciously, and everyone can see it, and someone else has been courageous enough to see it, name it, but now it's not legitimised. So I sent it to the Australian Human Rights Commission, and they refused to investigate it. It's just an absurd amount of abuse. Now, I've, in my desperation, written again to the Prime Minister of the country, and I asked him if he would compassionately make a settlement just so I can have some prosperity, enough to live and survive. I'm not going to make a fuss. He didn't get back to me. The Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, refuses my acknowledgement of any emails, any phone calls, or any communication whatsoever. I can't believe it. He's the Attorney General of the country, and guess who he oversees? That's right, the AAT, the Human Rights Commission, Comcare, AFCA, and what's the other one? All those. He oversees that. He's the hierarchical leader of that. Now, this clearly triangulates or quadrulates into another difficult situation. I don't expect to be treated any differently than any other free citizen of the country. I really don't. I don't want to be important. I don't want to even be this person. I don't want to be the one. I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to be treated any differently. But my situation is unique, and you can't really argue the fact now, after I've spoken, that it's really equitable or fair that I be ignored like this, because as we know, and as I said earlier, a methodology of abusing someone is the silent treatment, not acknowledging them. It's when you say something and it's not legit or validated in any way. And this is a clear conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, and he's abusing me. I don't know what to do about it. Does anyone know Mark Dreyfus's number? So what's demonstrable here is that the powers that be have not been fair, equal, or fair in the equitable, or even independent in their dealings with me. On all things, going back to probably 2004, when I was stitched up at the Herald Sun and lost my job at The Age, I've been a targeted individual, and I've really had a gutful, to be honest. You know, I'm really grateful for my life. I am. I'm grateful they saved me. I'm grateful that I'm here and I'm queer and I'm drinking a beer. I actually have one today. I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful for the things that people have done for me. They've put me in this house, but they won't sign the thing. Mum brings over some food, but she won't make a report to the Human Rights Commission. Jodie loves me, but she won't talk to me. It's one and then the other, you know. Is anyone out there listening to this that can just, for a minute, sit back and think, holy fuck, Rich is right. Rich is actually the right one. And perhaps by our non-action, we're elongating his abuse and not validating it or acknowledging it in any way. And this, as a method of oppression, is very effective. I don't have anyone in my life now. Not one person. My power of attorneys just up and left. Sue Ellen, hi Sue Ellen. Thanks for the nasty text. The people who care for me are also abusing me. And get this, the mental health unit of which I'm a part has diagnosed me and force medicated me with needles for ingrained delusions of persecution. And that's why my life is a black comedy. That's why things are fucked. And that's why I just have to keep on keeping on. But I don't pretend that other people don't have problems. I really don't. I know other people have got problems. But when you've got such a unique one as mine, and it's so profound and systemic, it boggles my head that I can be ignored anymore. But anyway, ignored I am, and I'm just sitting here. No one's calling. No one's coming to my aid. I'm not getting paid soon. This is pretty shit for me. I've also emailed Gabrielle Williams, my local member in Dandenong. She's refused to get back to me. I've emailed the public interest disclosure at DSS, because now that Scott Treadwell from the federal court has said I'm an employee, I'm allowed to whistleblow there. So I did. And I said it all. And I even admitted to 5 years of Centrelink fraud under coercion, doubling myself in, and they won't act. I'm a failed whistleblower at the federal court, at the Ombudsman, at the Australian Human Rights Commission, and at NDIS and the Health Department. And I'm fast running out of options here. I'm a failed whistleblower. I can't get a lawyer. I can't go to police. My life's been threatened to be killed. I know people hate me. I know people wouldn't act if harm was happening to me. And it leaves me in a very vulnerable situation. I'm quite stoic. I like life. I've got a beautiful dog. I like the simple things. I like nature. I like there's a bit of a thrill, actually, a weird masochismic thrill in exposing this for what it is, because I've got an unquenchable thirst for justice and fairness and equity, and I'm really idealistic in believing that this is going to come to a head. But you know what's going to happen? If I don't have enough food, if I don't have a place to stay, if I don't have friends, if I don't have family, if I don't have money, if I don't have rights, if I don't have insurance, and I don't have any support networks or anyone to acknowledge anything I've said ever, I'm going to die. And that's the sad reality of this situation, because I don't want to die. But the powers that be and the mechanisms that support politicians and public servants that have allowed a scapegoat to exist, I know that they would prefer to sacrifice me and get rid of the truth seeker rather than acknowledge that they're a part of the system which allows a scapegoat to exist. I've got a bit of a battle on my hands. Can anyone help me? I've got no money. Gets down to money, doesn't it? Because if you want to destroy someone, destroy their reputation and money, then you got them. That's what they've done. I'm not a bad person. I never have been. And I'm still well-spoken, equitable, fair. My vernacular is still in check, and my intelligence, but sadly my memory's really suffering at the moment because of the brain injury, for which there's no compensation, but we've already been there. This is Rich. This is my house. Crystal, come here. No, she's not going to come. It's Rich McLean. I had to tell this story today because I don't know what to do. I'll have no home soon. I've got no one to stick up for me. Can anyone out there, stick up for me? I don't know what to say. I love you all. I love all people. I really do. I just am misunderstood. I've never been acknowledged. I upset the power balance, and I think somehow that people may feel a little bit implicated in the disaster that is my life, but refuse to act and put the emphasis on me for kind of going forward and making it right. And I've really tried, and I'm really trying. But opposed by incredible powers that be, it's almost impossible.